A gleaming sword rests in a museum case, impossibly sharp after 1,000 years. How did hands without modern tools create such perfection? We are about to unlock 30 forgotten secrets of the forge, methods that built empires and crafted legends. You will discover the exact skills that ancient masters used to manipulate metal in ways we can barely comprehend today. We will uncover how they made steel that could slice through armor and mirrors that projected hidden images. What do you believe was the greatest achievement of these ancient artists? The answer begins with a single, unassuming lump of metal. This is not ordinary steel, but a legendary material known as woots. Forged in the crucibles of ancient India and Sri Lanka, its surface shimmered with flowing patterns like water frozen in time. This was the heart of the famed Damascus sword, a blade so sharp and resilient it could reportedly slice through a falling silk scarf or another sword. But its beauty was more than decoration. It was the visible signature of a microscopic miracle. Creating woots was an alchemical ritual. Specific iron ores were combined with carbon-rich materials like wood or leaves, sealed inside a clay pot and heated for days on end. This was not a quick blast in a furnace, but a patient, controlled dance with fire. The true magic happened during the agonizingly slow cooling process. Over many days, as the sealed crucible cooled, the elements inside arranged themselves into a structure of incredible complexity. Modern scientists examining ancient samples were astounded. They found carbon nanotubes and nanowires, structures we associate with advanced modern technology, self-assembled within the steel. These, along with bands of hard iron carbide, created a material that was both incredibly hard and astonishingly flexible. A blade made from woot steel would not easily snap. It could bend and return to true, all while holding an edge sharper than any other metal of its age. And then this knowledge simply vanished. The precise recipe, the specific ores, the exact timing of the heat, it all faded into obscurity for centuries. Why would such a powerful technique be forgotten? Was it a guarded secret that died with its masters, or did the trade routes that supplied its unique ingredients collapse? The loss of woot stands as one of history's great technological mysteries, a peak of metalworking genius that we are only just beginning to understand again. From the molecular mastery of woot steel, we move to a technique that gave form to gods and kings. This method captured the fleeting softness of wax and transformed it into eternal metal. It is called the lost wax process, and it is one of the most enduring forms of magic ever practiced by human hands. An artisan would begin with a core of clay, roughly shaped like the final statue. Over this, they would painstakingly build up a model using beeswax, sculpting every minute detail, every curl of hair, every fold of drapery, and every subtle muscle with their hands. This wax original was a masterpiece in its own right, but it was destined for sacrifice. The wax model was then encased in a thick, heat-resistant clay mold. Once this outer shell was baked hard in a fire, the unthinkable happened. The mold was turned upside down and the wax was melted away, pouring out from a specially designed channel. What remained was a perfect, hollow negative space, a ghostly impression of the original sculpture imprisoned within the clay. Into this empty tomb, molten bronze or gold was poured, a river of liquid fire filling every crevice. Once the metal cooled and solidified, the outer clay mold was broken apart, shattered to reveal the gleaming metal statue within. This was a one-time process, the original wax model forever lost to create a single, unique metal piece. The level of detail this method achieved was simply breathtaking. Look at the Benin bronzes from West Africa with their intricate patterns and lifelike expressions. Or consider the rippling muscles and flowing cloaks of ancient Greek sculptures. These were not carved from solid metal, an almost impossible task. They were born from this delicate dance of wax and fire. But the true revolution went beyond artistry. For the first time, this technique allowed for a form of mass production. A master sculptor could create one perfect wax model. From that single original, an entire series of identical clay molds could be made. This meant a workshop could produce multiple copies of a popular figurine, a standard weight for trade, or a legion of identical spearheads, each one a perfect duplicate of the last. In a world of one-of-a-kind objects, this was a conceptual leap as profound as the invention of the printing press. The lost wax method gave the ancient world both unparalleled artistic beauty and the first glimpse of industrial replication, all born from the simple, sacrificial melting of a beeswax form. That same brilliance of gold could be achieved without a single hammer blow, using a method as dangerous as it was dazzling. Mercury gilding was the ancient world's answer to perfect permanent gold plating, a technique that sacrificed the health of its artisans for immortal beauty. Roman and Chinese masters perfected this deadly art. They began by dissolving gold into liquid mercury, creating a silvery, paste-like amalgam. This thick slurry could be painted onto a bronze statue, a piece of jewelry, or palace decor, clinging to every curve and detail. Then came the most perilous step. The object was gently heated. As the temperature rose, the mercury would begin to vaporize, rising in invisible, toxic fumes. Left behind was a microscopically thin, perfectly even, and incredibly durable layer of pure gold, bonded to the metal beneath. The result was a breathtaking, solid gold appearance at a fraction of the cost. You can still see this brilliance today on ancient Roman bronzes, where the gilding has outlasted the centuries, but this beauty came at a horrific human cost. The artisans performing this work were slowly poisoned. Inhaling mercury vapors leads to devastating neurological damage, tremors, and madness, a condition once known as Mad Hatter's disease. These craftsmen were literally trading their sanity and their lives to adorn the powerful with splendor. It forces a difficult question, one that echoes through many of these forgotten techniques. How do we weigh the breathtaking achievements of the past against the human suffering that often made them possible? The legacy of mercury gilding is a dual one, a testament to both stunning artistic innovation and a profound accepted brutality. While the poison of mercury gilding claimed lives in workshops, another method harnessed fire and iron to create blades that became legends on the battlefield. This was the art of pattern welding, a brutal ballet of hammer and heat that built swords layer by layer. Imagine taking several thin rods of iron, some with more carbon to make them hard, others with less to keep them flexible. A smith would heat these rods in a charcoal fire until they glowed a brilliant orange, then carefully hammer them together into a single, solid billet. This act of forge welding was a moment of pure faith, as the smith had to strike with perfect force at the exact moment of heat to fuse the metals without burning them. But the true craftsmanship began after this first weld. The smith would then heat the billet again, and with tongs and hammer, twist it into a spiral, a process that folded the different metals over and over upon themselves. This twisted bar was then hammered flat and drawn out into the shape of a sword. When the finished blade was polished and lightly etched with a weak acid, the hidden miracle was revealed. The surface of the steel erupted in a mesmerizing, watery pattern of light and dark lines, each ripple and swirl a map of the countless layers trapped within. This beautiful effect was not the primary goal, it was a glorious side effect of creating a superior weapon. The hard, high-carbon steel gave the sword its deadly, lasting edge. The softer, low-carbon iron gave the blade its flexibility and resilience, allowing it to absorb the tremendous impact of a shield or another sword without snapping. A pattern-welded sword was essentially a composite material, a primitive form of lamination that gave a warrior the best of both worlds, a blade that was both a scalpel and a crowbar. The most famous practitioners of this art were the Vikings and the warriors of the migration period. Their swords, with evocative names like Ulfbert, were not just tools of war, they were status symbols, their swirling patterns a visible testament to the skill of the smith and the wealth of the owner. To hold one was to hold a piece of stormy sea captured in steel, a weapon as beautiful as it was brutally effective. While pattern welding created strength and beauty on the grand scale of a sword, another ancient art achieved the opposite, achieving breathtaking detail on a surface smaller than a fingernail. This was the technique of granulation, a form of metallic pointillism that defied the limits of human eyesight and steadiness of hand. Artisans, most famously the Etruscans, would begin by taking the purest gold or silver. They would painstakingly cut this precious metal into minute fragments, then place them inside a crucible filled with charcoal dust. When heated, the surface tension of the molten metal would pull each fragment into a perfect microscopic sphere. The result was a collection of thousands upon thousands of tiny, identical granules, each one a shimmering droplet of metal. The true test of skill came next. Using a fine brush, perhaps a single hair, the artist would arrange these minuscule spheres onto the surface of a jewelry piece, a pendant or an earring. They would position them into elaborate patterns, geometric labyrinths, or even the petals of a flower, all while working at a scale where a single sneeze could destroy days of labor. But how do you attach something so small and delicate without melting it into a shapeless blob? The secret was a magical chemical paste, a mixture of copper salts and organic glue. The artisan would carefully paint this paste around the base of each arranged granule. When the entire piece was heated in a furnace, the paste would react. The organic glue would burn away, but the copper would fuse with the gold at the points of contact, creating an invisible, incredibly strong solder joint. The granules themselves, being pure gold with a high melting point, remained perfectly spherical. The final effect was a surface that seemed to shimmer and vibrate with light. Etruscan jewelry from over 2,500 years ago displays patterns so fine and complex they appear to be woven from light itself. They created textures that mimicked the seeds of a pomegranate or the delicate scales of a fish, achieving a level of refinement that modern jewelers, with all their magnifying lenses and laser welders, still struggle to replicate perfectly. This was not an art of brute force, but of supreme patience and a deep, almost alchemical, understanding of materials. It makes you wonder what kind of society valued such patient, miniature perfection, and what did they see in that play of light on a surface of 1,000 tiny golden stars? The shimmer of granulation is a testament to pure patience, but the art of damascening brought a different kind of magic to metal, one of bold contrast and intricate storytelling. It is crucial to distinguish this from the Damascus steel we explored earlier. That was a method of forging the steel itself to create its watery patterns. Damascening, however, is a surface art, the practice of inlaying precious metals into a darker, harder base. An artisan would begin with a finished object of iron or steel, perhaps a sword hilt or a ceremonial vase. Using a sharp, chisel-like tool, they would carve a complex network of fine channels and grooves into the hardened surface. This alone required a supremely steady hand, as a single misplaced strike could ruin the entire piece. Then they would take thin, soft wires of pure gold or silver and carefully lay them into the carved recesses. With precise, controlled hammer blows, they would weld the soft, precious metal into the hard steel grooves, permanently locking the two different materials together. The final step was to polish the surface until it was mirror smooth, revealing the gleaming, intricate design perfectly set within the dark metal. The contrast was stunning, a permanent drawing in gold against a field of shadow. This technique flourished across the globe, from the ornate armor and sword hilts of Moorish Spain, which often featured intricate geometric patterns and Arabic calligraphy, to the breathtaking tsubas or sword guards of feudal Japan. Japanese masters elevated damascening to an art form, creating miniature landscapes with mountains, rivers, and forests rendered in gold and silver inlay on the small iron guard of a samurai's katana. This was not mere decoration, it was a statement of identity and wealth. A damascened weapon was a mobile gallery, a display of status that announced the owner's refinement and power with every gleam of light. The skill required was immense, a fusion of a sculptor's precision, a metalsmith's strength, and a painter's eye for design. It transformed cold, functional steel into a canvas for some of the most enduring art ever created by human hand. While the art of damasoning carved stories into a surface, another method made the metal itself rise up to tell its tale. This is the two-part dance of repousse and chasing, a technique that transforms a flat sheet of gold, silver, or bronze into a dynamic sculptural relief. The process begins from behind, with the metal placed face down on a soft, yielding surface like pitch or leather. The artisan then takes rounded punches and hammers, working from the reverse to push the metal outward. This is repousse, a word meaning to push forward. With each controlled tap, the flat sheet slowly bulges and swells, the design emerging in reverse like a ghost taking form. The silhouette of a face, the curve of a muscle, the spread of an eagle's wings, all are born from this patient, percussive pressure from the back. Once the primary form is raised, the metal is flipped over. Now the artist moves to the front for the second act, the art of chasing. With finer, sharper tools, they work on the now elevated design. This is not about moving large amounts of metal, but about definition and texture. They incise the lines of a beard, the feathers on a wing, the delicate patterns on a gown, carving crisp detail into the raised form. The famous mask of Agamemnon, that haunting gold funeral mask from Mycenaean Greece, is a masterwork of this method. You can almost feel the hammer blows that shaped its strong nose and full lips from behind, and see the chasing tools that defined its mustache and expressive eyebrows from the front. This was not a cast object, but a sheet of gold beaten into the likeness of a king. Similarly, the bosses of Celtic shields were not just lumps of metal, they were complex, swirling triskells and mythic animals hammered into high relief, designed to intimidate and mesmerize in equal measure on the battlefield. Repousse and chasing gave metal a third dimension, allowing it to capture light and shadow in a way flat surfaces never could. It was an art of both brute force and delicate precision, a conversation between the hammer from behind and the chisel from the front, resulting in a face that seems to breathe just beneath the metal skin. That same hammer that shaped gold could also fall upon an alloy born from catastrophe. The fires that destroyed the great city of Corinth were said to have forged a legend in their ashes. As the story goes, when the Roman army sacked the city, the intense heat of the burning buildings caused a miraculous fusion. Gold and silver treasures, along with the copper of statues and vessels, all melted together into shimmering metallic streams. From this urban funeral pyre emerged a new substance, a metal of unparalleled beauty that became known as Corinthian bronze. Ancient writers like Pliny the Elder wrote of it with awe, describing its unique, ruddy gold luster, a color that seemed to hold the fire of its own violent birth. It was said to be more valuable than silver and was coveted for the most exquisite statuettes and decorative arts, but here lies the enduring mystery. What was Corinthian bronze really? Modern metallurgists are deeply divided. Some believe it was a specific, deliberate recipe, a type of brass alloyed with precious metals. They point to ancient descriptions of its golden red hue, which could match a high-quality brass containing a small, deliberate percentage of gold and silver. Others argue it was never a single alloy at all, but rather a term for the highest grade of brass, a material Corinth was already famous for producing. In this view, the dramatic story of the city's burning was simply a romantic myth attached to an already prestigious product. The painful truth is that we have no definitive archaeological evidence. No object has ever been conclusively identified as being made from the true, legendary Corinthian bronze. Its composition is a ghost in the historical record, praised for centuries but leaving no physical trace for us to analyze. Was it a lost recipe, a secret that perished with the city's master smiths? Or was its greatest value always in the story itself, a tale of beauty born from ruin that made ordinary metal seem extraordinary? The legend of Corinthian bronze remains one of antiquity's most tantalizing puzzles, a shimmering mystery just beyond the reach of our science. The legend of Corinthian bronze is a mystery of lost materials, but the quenching of a blade was a moment of pure, terrifying alchemy. One wrong move could turn a masterpiece into a pile of scrap. The plunge of red-hot steel into a liquid was the most critical and dramatic step in the entire forging process. This was not a simple cooling off. It was a sudden, violent shock that would lock the steel's molecular structure into its final, unchangeable form. Ancient smiths knew that water alone was not the only answer. In fact, using plain water was often a gamble, a risk that could make a blade as hard as glass but also as brittle. The true masters understood that the secret lay in the liquid itself. They experimented with every conceivable medium, each one a carefully guarded component of their personal recipe. One smith might swear by the slow, forgiving cool of warm oil, which produced a blade that was tough and resilient, less likely to crack under stress. Another might use a sharp, fast brine, a solution of salt and water that cooled the steel even more rapidly than pure water, creating an edge of extreme, aggressive hardness. And then there were the more esoteric recipes, the ones whispered about in legends, the urine of a red-headed boy or the blood of a powerful animal. Were these mere superstition, or did they contain a kernel of practical truth? A boy's urine, for instance, has a specific chemical composition, with salts and ammonia that could indeed alter the quenching process, potentially resulting in a unique surface hardness. These smiths were proto-chemists working not with formulas but with instincts honed over a lifetime at the forge. They knew that the speed of cooling was everything. A rapid quench created a hard, needle-like structure in the steel called martensite, perfect for a razor-sharp edge. But if the steel cooled too quickly, the internal stresses became too great and the blade would develop fatal cracks. A slower quench like that from oil created a tougher, more flexible steel able to withstand heavy impacts. The goal was to find the perfect balance, a blade hard enough to slice but tough enough not to shatter. The legendary Japanese swordsmiths treated their quenching medium, a special water from a specific stream or well, as a sacred secret. They would perform purification rituals before the final quench, understanding that this single, irreversible act would either give life to a legendary katana or destroy weeks of painstaking labor. The hiss of the steel entering the liquid was the sound of a birth or a death. It was the moment where fire met its opposite, and in that explosive meeting, a weapon of perfect balance was born. That terrifying hiss of the quench was only half the story. The true masters of the forge learned to cheat the process, to command the fire and the liquid to harden one part of a blade while leaving another soft. This was the genius of differential hardening, a technique that gave a single piece of steel a split personality. Imagine a sword blade glowing red-hot from the forge. Before its final, fateful plunge, the smith would take a special, heat-resistant clay paste and carefully paint it onto the steel, but they would not cover the entire blade. Instead, they would coat the broad, flat sides and, most importantly, the thick spine of the sword, leaving only the razor-thin cutting edge completely bare. This was a deliberate act of insulation. When the prepared blade was thrust into the quenching bath, the naked edge met the liquid directly. It cooled in a violent, instantaneous shock, locking its molecular structure into a state of extreme glass-like hardness. This gave the sword its legendary sharpness. Meanwhile, the clay-covered spine and sides cooled at a much slower, more gentle pace. This insulated metal remained tough and flexible, able to bend and absorb massive impacts without snapping. The result was a blade that was a paradox, a perfect union of opposites. It had a cutting edge that could slice through armor, supported by a spine that could withstand the brutal shock of combat. This technique is most famously associated with the Japanese katana, where the differential hardening process creates a visible, wavy line along the blade known as the hamon. This line is not merely decorative, it is the literal boundary between the hard edge and the soft spine, the ghost of the clay template forever etched into the steel. But this concept was not unique to Japan. European sword makers, particularly those crafting the long, slender blades of the late medieval period, also understood the principle. They might not have used clay with the same ritualistic precision, but they achieved a similar effect through localized heating and quenching, ensuring their blades would not shatter when parrying a heavy blow. Differential hardening was the ultimate solution to the swordsmith's oldest dilemma. How do you create a weapon that is both unbreakably tough and lethally sharp? The answer was to stop trying to make the entire blade the same, and instead to master the art of controlled contradiction, giving a single piece of metal two very different souls. The split soul of a sword born from fire and clay shows us that ancient metalworkers understood contrast. They did not just master the metal itself, they mastered its marriage to other substances, creating vibrant dialogues of color and texture. This is the broader art of inlaying, a craft that went far beyond the gold and silver of damascening to embrace darkness and jewel-toned light. One of the most dramatic of these materials was niello, a powdered mixture of copper, silver, and lead sulfides. An artisan would begin by engraving a deep, intricate design into a surface of polished silver or gold. Then they would carefully sprinkle the black niello powder into the carved channels. The piece was placed in a furnace where the intense heat would melt the powder into a thick, glossy, liquid jet that flowed into every groove. Once cooled, the surface was polished smooth, revealing a design of stunning clarity, a permanent black drawing sealed within the gleaming precious metal. The effect was like a finely printed ink illustration on a mirror, capturing incredible detail for scenes of mythology or daily life. Roman dining sets often featured niello work, their silver plates telling stories of gods and heroes in sharp black and white, a spectacle for guests at a feast. But the palette of inlaying did not stop there. The same principle of carving and filling was used for vitreous enamel, where crushed glass of vibrant colors was packed into recesses and fired until it melted into a permanent, gem-like glaze. Medieval artisans used this technique to breathtaking effect on reliquaries and ceremonial cups, creating figures of saints with ruby red robes and emerald green backgrounds, their stories illuminated in a fire-born rainbow. And of course, there was the direct inlaying of precious stones themselves, their raw, natural color set into the cool metal to signify divine power or immense wealth. This was not mere decoration, it was a form of storytelling that engaged the eye in a way plain metal never could. It transformed a functional object, be it a plate, a weapon, or a holy container, into a narrative canvas. The next time you see an ancient piece with that stark black design or a flash of colored glass, remember the careful carving, the precise filling, and the final fire that locked the story into the metal forever. Fire gilding offered a different path to that same golden brilliance, a path that was only slightly less perilous than its mercury-based cousin. This method also relied on an amalgam, a thick paste made by dissolving gold into a liquid metal. But here, the toxic mercury was often replaced with other, slightly less volatile metals or mixed with a special chemical agent called a flux. The artisan would paint this golden slurry onto an object made of bronze, silver, or copper, carefully coating every surface. Then the piece was subjected to intense heat. As the temperature soared, the flux would bubble and burn away, and the other components of the amalgam would vaporize, leaving behind only the pure, shimmering gold fused directly to the metal beneath. The result was a stunning, durable gilding that looked and felt like solid gold. This technique became the gold standard for grandeur across continents. In the great cathedrals of medieval Europe, it was fire gilding that made altar pieces and religious statues gleam as if touched by divine light. The armor of kings and nobles was transformed into a second skin of sun-like radiance, a blatant display of power and divine right on the battlefield. Across Asia, it adorned the regalia of emperors and the intricate decorations of palaces, a universal symbol of status and sanctity. While it avoided the worst neurotoxins of mercury gilding, fire gilding was by no means safe. The fumes from the burning flux and vaporizing metals were still poisonous, slowly damaging the lungs and health of the craftsmen who worked over the hot furnaces day after day. It was a choice between two evils, a slightly less immediate poison for the sake of achieving an immortal beauty. This relentless pursuit of perfection, regardless of the human cost, forces us to confront a difficult reality about these ancient arts. How many masterpieces in our museums carry the invisible, sacrificed breath of the artisans who created them? That shimmering fire gilding captured light, but another alloy was created for the sole purpose of capturing a reflection. Before glass mirrors, the clearest image of yourself came from a disc of speculum metal. This was no ordinary bronze. It was a special, secret recipe of approximately 1 part tin to 2 parts copper, a mixture that pushed the boundaries of the possible. When cast, its surface was a dull, pale gray, but in the hands of a master polisher it was transformed, using increasingly fine abrasives from sand to crushed stone to jeweler's rouge. The artisan would work the surface for hours, days, until it achieved a luminous, silver-white shine, a polish so perfect it became a window into a metallic world. This was the mirror of the ancient and medieval world, a prized possession for anyone wealthy enough to afford one. But the very thing that gave speculum metal its magnificent reflectivity was also its fatal flaw. That high tin content, so crucial for its hard, pale surface, made the alloy incredibly brittle. Casting it was a nightmare of tension. As the molten metal cooled in its mold, it would contract, and the different cooling rates of the copper and tin created immense internal stresses. A speculum disc was just as likely to emerge from its mold with a network of fine cracks as it was in one perfect piece. It was a material that demanded absolute mastery over temperature and cooling from the metal caster. The slightest flaw in the process, an impurity in the metals, a draft on the mold, and weeks of work would end in a pile of glittering shards. For centuries, these fragile metal mirrors were the best humanity had. Then, in the Renaissance, a new method emerged in Venice, the glass-blowing capital of the world. Artisans learned to coat the back of flat glass with a mixture of mercury and tin, creating a clearer, brighter, and far less brittle reflective surface. Almost overnight, the painstaking art of casting and polishing speculum metal for mirrors became obsolete. The knowledge did not vanish, however. It simply found a new purpose, one that looked not into the self but into the heavens. This brittle, brilliant alloy was about to become the heart of a new invention, a tool that would extend human sight to the very edges of the cosmos. That fragile brilliance of speculum metal was destined for the stars, but another form of metalwork was designed to endure the brutal chaos of the earth. It was an armor not of solid plates, but of fabric woven from iron, a mesh of 10,000 individual links known as chainmail. Creating it was an act of supreme patience, a marathon of repetitive tasks that transformed simple wire into a second skin for warriors. The process began not with a hammer, but with a draw plate. A smith would take a rod of iron and painstakingly pull it through a series of progressively smaller holes in a hardened steel plate. Each pull would stretch and thin the metal, lengthening it into a uniform, springy wire. This wire was then coiled tightly around a central rod, creating a long, continuous spring of metal. The next step was as simple as it was monotonous. This metal spring was sliced down its length with a chisel, producing a cascade of individual rings, each one an open circle of iron. But an open ring was useless. It would simply pull apart under stress. The final, crucial step was to close each one permanently. In the most common and strongest method, each ring was overlapped at the ends and a tiny hole was punched through both layers. A minuscule iron rivet, often hand-forged, was then inserted into this hole and hammered flat, locking the ring into an unbreakable loop. The true genius of chainmail lay in its assembly. Each of these riveted rings was linked through 4 others above, below, and to either side. This created a fabric that was incredibly flexible, allowing a warrior to run, bend, and swing a sword with near-total freedom, yet it was also remarkably resilient. A sword's edge could not cut through it. The linked rings would simply disperse the force of the blow across a wide area, turning a lethal slash into a bruising impact. It was a defense against the most common threats on the ancient and medieval battlefield. This was not a single technique, but a symphony of separate skills. The wire drawer, the coiler, the riveter, all had to be masters of their specific task. In a large workshop, this could be a form of early assembly line, with different artisans specializing in one part of the process. The result was a garment that could weigh 30 pounds or more, a heavy shirt of iron that represented months, sometimes years, of labor. When you see a replica of chainmail, do not just see a metal shirt. See the 10,000 individual rings, each one drawn, coiled, cut, and riveted by hand. See the countless hours of focused, meticulous work that went into protecting a single life. It stands as a monumental testament to the value placed on human survival, a value measured not in a single grand gesture, but in 10,000 perfectly closed iron rings. A warrior's chainmail was a shield of 10,000 visible links, but the greatest protection of the ancient world was often invisible, hidden in plain sight. Deep in China, during the Han and Tang dynasties, metalworkers created objects that defied all logic, bronze mirrors that held a secret image no one could see. On the surface, they were masterpieces of the polisher's art, with a face so perfectly smooth and reflective you could use it to arrange your hair. The back was often beautifully cast with intricate designs, poetry, or symbols of good fortune. But these mirrors held a deeper magic. If you caught a beam of bright sunlight and reflected it onto a dark wall, something impossible happened. The circle of light projected onto the wall was not a blank, featureless disk. Instead, shimmering within the light was a perfect, ghostly image of the pattern cast on the back of the mirror. A dragon would appear, coiled and breathing ethereal fire. Or a message of blessing would float, written in light. They were called magic mirrors, and for centuries no one in the West could explain how they worked. The secret was not in the reflection itself, but in the structure of the mirror. During the casting and finishing process, the artisans performed a kind of alchemy with thickness. The design on the back was not merely decorative, it subtly altered the thickness of the entire mirror. Where the raised parts of the design were on the back, the front of the mirror was ever so slightly thicker. Where the recessed parts were, the front was microscopically thinner. This variation was invisible to the eye and hand, a perfect secret held within the bronze. The final, crucial step was the scraping. After the mirror was cast, the master would meticulously scrape the reflective face. It is believed they scraped the thicker sections just a fraction more than the thinner ones, creating an almost imperceptible curvature. When light hits the mirror's face, most of it reflects straight back, creating the bright disk. But the areas with these microscopic curves, these subtle hills and valleys corresponding to the hidden design, bend the light differently. They scatter it, creating a slightly dimmer pattern. Our eyes cannot see this subtle difference on the mirror's shiny surface, but when projected onto a wall, the pattern emerges like a photographic negative drawn in light and shadow. Modern scientists, armed with lasers and precision instruments, have confirmed this theory. They can measure the infinitesimal warping. Yet, even with this knowledge, reproducing a magic mirror that works as brilliantly as the ancient originals has proven incredibly difficult. The exact combination of casting technique, alloy composition, and the intuitive feel of that final scraping remains a closely guarded secret lost to time. It was not sorcery, but a sublime understanding of physics, a manipulation of metal and light so perfect it created a miracle. These artisans were not just making a tool for vanity, they were encoding a hidden world into the very surface of reality, a message that could only be read by the sun itself. A name stamped into a blade could make a warrior's heart stop. Ulfbert. More than 170 of these swords have been found across Europe, each bearing this powerful inscription inlaid with iron letters. But what truly set an Ulfbert apart was not its name, but the secret of its steel. While most Viking swords were forged from the crude, slag-filled iron of local bloomery furnaces, the Ulfberts were born from a different kind of fire. They were made from a material called crucible steel, a purer, higher carbon metal that was centuries ahead of anything being produced in Europe at the time. How did this superior steel reach the hands of Norse smiths? The answer lies in the vast trade routes that connected the Viking world to the east. The Volga trade routes acted as a metallic silk road, carrying goods from the heart of the Islamic world, where masters in modern-day Iran and Central Asia had perfected the art of crucible steel. This was not a local ore, it was an imported luxury, likely traveling as finished ingots or raw lumps, a precious cargo traded for furs, amber, and slaves. The difference this material made was the difference between a good weapon and a legendary one. Ordinary bloomery steel was a messy composite. The smelting process left behind countless tiny pockets of glass-like slag, impurities that made the metal brittle and prone to cracking under stress. A sword was only as strong as its weakest flaw. Crucible steel, by contrast, was made by sealing iron and carbon in a clay pot and melting it into a liquid state. This allowed the impurities to separate and rise to the top, leaving behind a near-homogeneous ingot of pure, high-carbon steel. When a smith forged an Ulfbert from this blank canvas, he was working with a material of stunning consistency. The result was a blade that was both harder and more flexible than any other sword on the battlefield. It could bend without taking a permanent set, and its edge would hold a razor's sharpness through the chaos of a shield wall. In a time when a broken sword could mean a swift death, the reliability of an Ulfbert was priceless. It was a technological marvel, a ghost of Eastern genius given a Norse name and a fearsome reputation. The existence of these swords forces us to redraw our map of the ancient world, revealing a network of knowledge and material exchange that was far more sophisticated than we often imagine. Plato's lost city of Atlantis was said to be ringed with walls of a mysterious metal, orichalcum. He described it as gleaming with a fiery red light, second only to gold in value and covering the walls of the citadel. For centuries, scholars have debated its true nature, a debate made more tantalizing because no verified sample of the legendary metal has ever been found. The most compelling theory suggests orichalcum was not a single mythical element, but a masterful human creation, a type of brass engineered to mimic the sun's own glow. Ancient metalworkers lacked pure zinc, which is notoriously difficult to extract from its ore, so they devised an ingenious workaround known as the cementation process. They would take a sealed clay vessel, a crucible, and fill it with lumps of copper along with a special zinc-rich ore called calamine. This crucible was then heated for hours in a hot furnace. Inside that sealed container, a silent, invisible transformation took place. The calamine ore did not melt. Instead, as the temperature rose, zinc vapor was released from the rock, a metallic gas that permeated the copper. This vapor gradually diffused into the copper, atom by atom, transforming its very structure. When the crucible was finally broken open, the craftsman would find not two separate materials, but a single, homogeneous ingot of golden yellow brass. This was not a surface coating, it was a complete transmutation, turning common copper into a noble, golden-looking alloy that was highly resistant to the green corrosion of bronze. This cementation brass, with its warm, rich color and durability, fits the ancient descriptions of orichalcum perfectly. It was a metal born not from a mine, but from a sealed pot and a clever understanding of chemistry. The legendary walls of Atlantis may be lost to the sea, but the very real, brilliant metal that inspired their story was being created in workshops across the ancient world, a testament to the human power to conjure wonder from fire and earth. The same hands that forged unbreakable swords also learned the delicate patience of a weaver. In the high Andes, ancient metalworkers achieved the impossible, transforming stubborn metal into something as soft and pliable as thread. They did not just hammer or cast their treasures, they wove them, creating crowns and baskets from pure gold and silver wire. This was the ultimate fusion of craft, a textile art rendered in eternal metal. The process began with the creation of the wire itself, drawn out to a remarkable thinness. But the true secret, the magic that made this basketry possible, was a profound understanding of a process called annealing. Metal, when worked by hammering or drawing, becomes hard and brittle. Its internal structure gets locked into place, and if forced to bend further, it will simply snap. The Andean masters knew that to keep the metal soft, they had to reset its internal clock. Again and again, as they wove their intricate patterns, they would stop. They would take the piece and heat it gently in a fire until it glowed a dull red. This was not a forging heat, but a restorative one. The gentle warmth allowed the strained crystals within the metal to relax and reform, returning the wire to its original, soft and malleable state. Only then could the artisan continue their work, bending and looping the metal as if it were a strand of straw. The results were breathtaking. A surviving crown from the Lambec culture is not a solid band of gold, but an open-work tapestry of woven wires, creating a headdress that was both incredibly light and dazzlingly complex. They made miniature baskets with handles and ornaments that mimicked the woven textiles they wore, all captured in shimmering, permanent metal. This was not merely a technical stunt, it was a philosophical statement. It represented a worldview where different forms of knowledge were not separate. The same rhythmic, interlacing patterns that held their fabrics together were now used to hold their most precious metals. The skill required was immense, a constant dance between the work of the hands and the command of the fire, a reminder that to master metal, you sometimes had to make it forget its own strength. Animal glue sounds more like a carpenter's tool than a metalworker's secret, yet this humble organic material was the key to some of the largest and most intricate bronze castings in history. In the great foundries of ancient China, artisans faced a monumental challenge. They needed to create massive clay molds for casting immense ritual vessels and statues, but ordinary clay was brittle. A mold for a piece weighing hundreds of pounds had to be moved and assembled without cracking, and then survive the terrifying thermal shock of having molten bronze poured into it. Their ingenious solution was to boil animal hides, sinews, and bones to create a strong, protein-based glue, which they then mixed into the clay. This single addition transformed the material. The glue acted as a powerful binder, giving the clay what is known as green strength. This meant the mold, even when dry, retained a degree of flexibility and incredible toughness, allowing workers to handle the massive sections and join them together without the fragile clay crumbling in their hands. But its true magic was revealed in the fire. When the molten bronze, heated to over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit, flooded into the mold, the glue-impregnated clay did not instantly shatter. Instead, the organic glue burned away slowly, creating microscopic channels that helped to vent steam and relieve the immense internal pressure. This granted the mold a critical moment of thermal shock resistance, just enough time for the metal to fill the most delicate recesses of the design before the clay finally broke apart. This is why the bronze vessels of the Shang and Zhou dynasties display such breathtakingly sharp and clear designs. You can see every precise geometric pattern, every fearsome Tauti mask, every spiral and thunder pattern rendered with a clarity that seems impossible for something cast over 3,000 years ago. The casting of a monumental vessel like the Humuwu Ding, a cauldron so large it could hold a man, was not just a feat of metallurgy. It was a triumph of composite material science where the strength of a slaughtered animal was harnessed to give form to eternal metal. It makes you wonder what other everyday organic substances did these ancient masters experiment with, and what lost recipes might still be hidden in the earth. That same principle of carving darkness into light found one of its most dramatic expressions with Niello. This was not a simple paint or stain, but a powdered glass made from metal. Artisans would grind together copper, silver, and lead sulfides into a fine black sand. The process began with a deeply engraved design on a polished surface of silver or, more rarely, gold. With a sharp graver, the craftsman would cut precise channels into the metal, creating a line drawing of stunning intricacy. Then, with the lightest touch, they would pack the black Niello powder into every single groove, brushing away the excess until the design was perfectly filled with that dark, gritty mixture. The true transformation happened in the fire. The object was placed into a furnace and the heat was carefully raised. Inside the engraved lines, the Niello powder did not just soften, it melted completely, fusing into a thick, liquid jet that flowed to fill every microscopic imperfection in the carving. When the piece was pulled from the heat and allowed to cool, the Niello had hardened into a solid, glossy, and incredibly durable inlay. The final step was the reveal. The artisan would take a polishing stone and carefully abrade the entire surface. The softer silver around the design would wear away, but the hardened, glass-like Niello in the grooves resisted, leaving it perfectly flush with the surface. The result was a masterpiece of contrast, a sharp, black drawing sealed forever within the gleaming metal, as crisp as a printed page. Byzantine artisans used this technique to adorn religious objects, their chalices and book covers telling sacred stories in stark, legible silhouettes. Later, Gothic goldsmiths elevated it to new heights, creating scenes of courtly love and chivalric hunts on the lids of ceremonial cups and the hilts of daggers. The beauty of Niello was its permanence and its clarity. Unlike paint, it would not fade or chip. It was a part of the metal itself, a story written not in ink, but in fire and powdered stone, designed to outlast the hands that made it and the eyes that first admired its perfect, dark brilliance. The stark, graphic contrast of Niello gives way to a flowing, organic artistry that seems to have grown rather than been forged. Deep in feudal Japan, metalsmiths created a material that mimicked the natural world with uncanny accuracy. This is the secret of mokyum gain, a name that translates beautifully to wood-grain metal. Its creation was a delicate gamble, a process that walked a razor's edge between fusion and failure. A smith would begin by meticulously cleaning and stacking thin plates of contrasting metals, perhaps shimmering silver, ruddy copper, and brilliant gold. This layered sandwich was placed into a forge and subjected to intense pressure, often from a heavy clamp, while being heated. The goal was not to melt the metals into a single soup, but to achieve a phenomenon called solid-state diffusion. At that critical, perfect temperature, the atoms at the boundaries of each metal plate would vibrate so intensely that they would begin to migrate across the borders, bonding the layers together into a single, solid billet without ever becoming a liquid. 1 degree too hot and the entire stack would melt into a worthless puddle. 1 degree too cool and the layers would remain separate, falling apart at the first strike of the hammer. The true artistry began once this fused billet was born. The smith would then sculpt this metallic block. Using punches, they would depress areas of the surface. They might drill holes partway into the billet or carve channels across it. Then they would painstakingly hammer and roll the entire piece flat. Where the metal had been compressed or carved, the underlying layers would be revealed. pulled up and stretched into swirling, intricate patterns that flowed like burled wood, swirling water, or even distant galaxies. Originally, this breathtaking material was reserved for the fittings of a samurai's katana, the menyuki that provided grip on the hilt, or the tsuba hand guard. It was a subtle, profound statement, a reminder that the warrior's deadly tool was also a work of natural, flowing art. Today, mokyum gain is one of the most prized and challenging techniques in art jewelry. Each piece is utterly unique, a captured moment of metallic flow that can never be exactly replicated. It represents a philosophy where the smith does not seek to impose a rigid design upon the metal, but instead becomes a collaborator with the material itself, coaxing out the hidden landscapes that lie within the layered heart of the billet. That shimmering illusion of wood-grain metal reveals how ancient smiths could transform a material's very soul. But in the Americas, they perfected an even greater deception, creating mountains of gold from a single ounce of the precious metal. This was the art of tumbaga, a golden lie that built empires. Tumbaga was a masterful alloy, a blend of gold and copper that could be tailored to a chieftain's wealth or a kingdom's resources. A smith might mix 1 part gold with 4 parts copper, or any ratio in between, creating a material that was far more practical than pure gold. While stunning, pure gold is a soft, heavy metal, prone to denting and losing its shape. By alloying it with copper, the metalworkers created a substance that was stronger, harder, and significantly lighter. A massive ceremonial bowl or an elaborate chest ornament could be made from tumbaga at a fraction of the weight and cost, yet it still carried the warm, golden glow of the sun itself. But the true genius, the final act of alchemy, was yet to come. An object fresh from the forge would have a reddish, coppery tint, a clear giveaway of its true, common nature. To complete the illusion, the artisans performed a chemical miracle known as depletion gilding. They would take the finished object and treat its surface with natural acidic juices, often from fermented fruits or certain plants. They might also bury it in a special, corrosive soil. This acidic bath would slowly eat away at the copper atoms on the surface, dissolving them and washing them away. The gold, being a noble metal that resists corrosion, was left utterly untouched. With repeated applications and careful polishing, the craftsmen would literally strip the copper from the outer layer of the object. What remained was a skin of pure 24-karat gold, perhaps only a few atoms thick, but perfectly masking the common metal heart beneath. To the eye and to the touch, it was indistinguishable from a solid gold treasure. The conquistadors never knew the difference. They melted down countless tumbaga objects, believing they were destroying solid gold idols, completely unaware that they were often destroying a thin, golden shell over a core of copper. This technique was not a cheap trick. It was a profound understanding of metallurgy and chemistry. It allowed cultures like the Muisca of Colombia to produce the legendary golden offerings thrown into Lake Guatavita, shimmering gifts for the gods that represented the pinnacle of their technical skill and spiritual devotion, a golden surface hiding a strong, practical heart. The Sikhs was more than a long knife. It was the soul of a Germanic warrior, a tool for both the hunt and the shield wall. To forge its long, slender blade from the poor quality iron of local bogs was a constant battle against the material itself. Early iron, smelted in a bloomery, was a mess of inconsistencies, a lump riddled with soft, pure iron and hard, brittle steel, all held together by pockets of glassy slag. A smith trying to draw this flawed mass into a long blade would inevitably hit a weak spot, a hidden flaw that could cause the entire piece to crack or snap under stress. The solution was a kind of metallic alchemy, a process of folding and fire welding that turned weakness into legendary strength. The smith would take these disparate pieces of iron and steel, stack them, and heat them to a brilliant, sparkling heat. With a hammer's precise blow at that perfect moment, they would fuse the stack into a single, solid billet. This act was repeated, the billet folded over, welded again, and drawn out dozens of times. Each fold multiplied the layers, intertwining the hard and soft metals into a complex laminated structure. The resulting blade was a composite material where the soft iron provided a flexible, shock-absorbing core, while the scattered pockets of high-carbon steel gave it a hard, durable edge. When the finished seeks was polished and etched, the hidden labor was revealed. The acid would bite into the softer iron more deeply, leaving it dark, while the harder steel resisted, standing out in silvery relief. This created the seeks' signature pattern, a bold, ladder-like design or a swirling, stormy grain that ran the length of the blade. This was not mere decoration, it was a quality mark, a visible guarantee. Every ripple and line was a map of the countless welds, proof that the smith had successfully homogenized the flawed iron, purging its weaknesses through sheer skill and effort. To own a pattern-welded seeks was to hold a piece of transformed earth, a blade whose beautiful, stormy surface was a direct testament to its unbreakable spirit. The patient art of filigree spun metal into lace, creating structures of breathtaking delicacy from nothing more than twisted wire. Where granulation used tiny spheres as points of light, filigree used the lines themselves, drawing with gold and silver thread. An artisan would begin by drawing the metal into impossibly fine wires, then carefully twisting them, braiding them, or hammering them flat to create different textures. These pliable wires were then bent and shaped with tiny tongs, curled into spirals, woven into rosettes, and arranged into intricate, open-work patterns resembling the most fragile embroidery. This entire delicate skeleton was then laid upon a solid metal backing or built into a self-supporting structure. The most perilous moment came next, the act of soldering. A single, careless application of heat could melt the entire delicate web into a shapeless, golden droplet. The smith used a paste of solder and a finely controlled torch, often just the tip of a hot wire, to touch the joints, fusing the design into a permanent, airy whole. In ancient Mesopotamia, this technique created headdresses for priestesses that seemed to be woven from sunlight itself. Egyptian royalty were buried with filigree pectorals and broad collars depicting gods and goddesses in minute, wiry detail. The Mycenaean Greeks perfected it, their golden diadems and funerary masks adorned with intricate, radiating sunbursts and swirling patterns that captured light and shadow in their delicate cages. To wear a piece of filigree was to wear captured breath, a testament to an artist who could command the strength of metal to express the weightlessness of a dream. Some ancient crucibles held more than just iron and carbon. Traces of an unexpected element, manganese, have been found in steel fragments from India and Central Asia, a ghost of a forgotten ingredient. This was no accident or impurity in the ore. Modern analysis suggests that master smiths were deliberately adding specific, manganese-rich minerals to their sealed pots before the long firing began. Why would they do this? The answer lies in manganese's dual nature. First, it acts as a powerful cleanser. Inside the superheated crucible, it bonds eagerly with unwanted elements like oxygen and sulfur, which can make steel brittle and weak. The manganese grabs these impurities, forming a slag that floats to the top, leaving behind a purer, more homogeneous ingot of steel. But its second role is even more brilliant. Manganese dramatically increases the steel's hardenability. This means that during the critical quenching process, the steel transforms into its hardest possible state more reliably and evenly throughout the entire blade. A manganese-enhanced sword would not just have a hard edge, it would be hard deep into its core, giving it a resilience that ordinary steel could not match. This subtle, intentional addition reveals a level of metallurgical understanding that seems to defy the era. These smiths were not just following a recipe, they were active experimenters, testing different minerals and observing the results in the quality of their finished blades. They learned that this one addition could solve multiple problems at once, creating a superior product through chemistry they could not see, but whose effects they could feel with every strike of their hammer. It forces us to ask, how many other mineral secrets did they test and discard, their failures lost to time, leaving only these rare, successful traces to hint at the true breadth of their genius. A hammer did not always need to strike with brute force. Sometimes its most powerful work was a slow, persistent coaxing, a gentle persuasion that convinced a flat, unwilling disk of metal to swell into a hollow vessel. This was the foundational art of raising, a technique that turned a circle of silver or bronze into a graceful bowl, a deep helmet, or a sacred chalice. The process began with a simple disc cut perfectly round. The smith would place this blank over a curved, T-shaped anvil called a stake. Then, with a rounded hammer, they would begin to tap not on the center, but in a concentric ring around the very edge. Each precise blow would push a tiny section of the metal lip downwards, curling it over the stake's curve. The smith would then rotate the disc a fraction and strike again, moving in a slow, patient circle. With each full rotation, the flat disc would develop a shallow, dished shape. But here was the critical secret, the rhythm that made the entire process possible. Metal, when hammered, becomes hard and uncooperative. Its internal structure locks up, and if forced to bend further, it will crack with a sound of finality. To prevent this, the smith had to constantly reset the metal's memory. After a few rounds of hammering, they would stop. They would take the now stiffening vessel and heat it in a forge until it glowed a soft cherry red. This was annealing, a gentle warming that relaxed the strained crystals within the metal, returning it to its original, soft and malleable state. Only then could the hammering resume, the smith moving the metal inward, ring by ring, each cycle of hammering and annealing drawing the walls higher and the shape deeper. The skill required was immense, a deep, intuitive feel for the material's behavior. A misplaced strike could create a thin spot, a weak point that would later tear. The rhythm was everything, a physical conversation between the smith, the hammer, and the glowing metal. This was how the magnificent silver amphoras of ancient Greece were formed, their elegant curves holding wine for the gods. This was how Celtic warriors shaped their bronze helmets, beating a single sheet into a protective shell that cradled the skull. Raising was an act of creation not by addition, but by transformation, a slow, stubborn insistence that a flat plane could become a vessel, that a circle could learn to hold the world. Those same vessels cast with animal glue held secrets locked within their walls, not in their shape, but in the words they carried. Deep within ancient Chinese ritual bronzes, you find entire libraries of history inscribed directly into the metal. These are not scratches added after the fact. The texts, sometimes hundreds of characters long, were cast into the very body of the vessel, a permanent part of its being. The process was a breathtaking feat of backward thinking. Before a single drop of bronze was poured, a master scribe would face the soft clay mold. With a sharp tool, they would begin to carve. But they were not writing for their own eyes. Every single character, every stroke of the intricate ancient script had to be carved in perfect mirror image reverse. One mistake, one character carved the right way around, would result in a jumbled, illegible mess on the final bronze. This required more than just skill. It demanded a complete mental reorientation, an ability to hold the entire text in the mind and transpose it onto the clay. The pressure was immense, for these were not simple signatures. They recorded the reasons for the vessel's creation, detailing military victories, land grants from the king, or commemorations of important rituals. They were legal documents and historical records meant to last for eternity. Once the molten bronze filled the mold and cooled, the clay was broken away to reveal the truth. The raised text stood in perfect, legible relief on the surface of the metal, a testament to the scribe's flawless backward calculation. This is why we can read the precise words of a Zhou dynasty nobleman today, 3,000 years later. The vessel itself became a time capsule, its form and its story forged together in a single, fiery birth. To look at one of these inscriptions is to witness a moment of supreme concentration, where a craftsman's hand and mind collaborated to defy time itself. ensuring that a king's command or a family's pride would never, ever be forgotten. The permanence of cast inscriptions gave history a voice, but Japanese metal masters sought a different kind of immortality, one of evolving color. They created an alloy that was born dull, only to be awakened to a deep, mesmerizing darkness by a carefully controlled death. This was the art of shakudo, a metal that began as a humble mix of copper with a small, precious percentage of gold, typically just 3 to 6%. To the untrained eye, the freshly forged object, perhaps a sword guard or a decorative menuki, was unremarkable, a simple reddish-brown. Its true potential lay dormant, a secret waiting for the final alchemical bath. The key was a special chemical solution called rokusho, a complex paste made from copper salts and other minerals. The artisan would polish the shakudo piece to a mirror finish, then immerse it in a boiling vat of this solution. What happened next was not a simple staining, but a deliberate and masterful act of corrosion. The chemicals attacked the surface of the alloy, but they did so selectively. The copper at the surface would oxidize, but the tiny, dispersed particles of gold would resist, influencing how the light interacted with the newly formed layer. The result, after repeated applications and gentle polishing, was a patina of unparalleled depth, a velvety blue-black or a rich, shimmering purple that seemed to contain an entire twilight sky within its surface. This was not a paint that could chip or fade. It was a transformation of the metal itself, a thin, stable skin of corrosion that became the final, permanent finish. The samurai who wore a sword with shakudo fittings was making a profound statement. The deep, serene darkness of the metal spoke of sophistication, restraint, and a mastery over nature itself. It was a beauty born not from resisting decay, but from guiding it, from commanding the very process of aging to create an object of timeless elegance. In the hands of these masters, rust was not the enemy, it was the final, most brilliant collaborator. A sword's broken tang could mean the death of a masterpiece, but ancient smiths held a secret repair, a metallic glue stronger than the iron itself. They called upon bronze not as a primary metal, but as a liquid bond. The technique was a clever workaround for a fundamental problem. Forging a solid weld between two pieces of wrought iron required a perfect, sparkling heat and a hammer's precise blow, a feat nearly impossible for complex joints or thin, delicate pieces. The solution was to think differently about the join. A smith would take the two iron parts, perhaps a broken axe head or a sword hilt, and fit them together with a tiny gap at the seam. They would then build a small clay dam around this joint, creating a miniature mold. The entire iron assembly was heated in a forge until it glowed a dull red. At this critical moment, the smith would take a crucible of molten bronze, a metal with a much lower melting point than iron, and pour the shimmering, golden liquid into the clay channel. The bronze would flow into the narrow gap between the superheated iron pieces. Here, the magic happened. The intense heat of the iron prevented the bronze from instantly solidifying. For a few seconds, the two metals would interact at the atomic level. Atoms from the iron would diffuse into the bronze, and atoms from the bronze would migrate into the iron, creating a thin, intermetallic layer that acted as a perfect, permanent bridge. When everything cooled, the clay was broken away to reveal a joint that was not merely stuck, but metallurgically fused. The resulting bond was incredibly strong, often stronger than the wrought iron itself. This method was a godsend for creating complex objects like chainmail shirts, where riveting every single link was laborious. A smith could simply lay two rings together, pour in a droplet of bronze, and create an instant, solid connection. We see this bronze welding in early Celtic artifacts and in the tools of the Roman era, a testament to practical ingenuity. It was a stopgap measure, a brilliant patch in the long history of metalworking, eventually superseded by more advanced iron welding techniques. But for centuries, it was the invisible strength holding the ancient world's iron fabric together, a golden stitch in a skeleton of steel. That golden stitch of bronze welding was a clever fix, but the greatest testament to ancient iron's endurance stands completely alone. In a courtyard in Delhi, a 7-ton iron pillar has defied the rain and sun for over 1,600 years. It bears no rust, only a thin, dark patina that has protected it since a time when the Roman Empire still stood. This is not a story of a master smith's secret recipe, but a happy accident of chemistry that created a metal capable of near immortality. The pillar was forged during the Gupta dynasty, a period of immense scientific and artistic achievement in India. The iron ore used was not chosen for purity, but likely for its abundance. Modern analysis revealed the pillar's secret: a surprisingly high phosphorus content and a very low presence of manganese and sulfur. This unique chemical fingerprint points to the forgotten smelting process itself. Ancient Indian furnaces used a specific method where the iron was not fully liquefied. Instead, it was produced as a spongy mass in a bloomery, a process that, when combined with certain local ores, left a high level of phosphorus trapped within the metal. This was not a deliberate addition, but an unavoidable characteristic of their local materials and technique. The phosphorus acted in two ways. First, it made the iron unusually strong and difficult to forge, which is why the pillar is made of large hammer-welded pieces. Second, and more importantly, it is the key to the legendary rust resistance. When the surface of the pillar is exposed to air and moisture, it does not form the flaky, destructive red oxide we know as rust. Instead, the phosphorus, along with the iron and oxygen from the air, slowly forms an incredibly thin, stable, and self-healing protective layer. Scientists have identified this layer as a compound called mesawite, a crystalline skin only a few hundred atoms thick. This passive film acts as an impenetrable shield. It prevents oxygen and water from reaching the pure iron beneath, effectively putting a stop to the corrosion process before it can truly begin. Any small scratch on this surface will, over time, heal itself as the chemical reaction forms a new protective layer. The iron pillar of Delhi is therefore a magnificent coincidence. It is the result of a specific, forgotten smelting method meeting a particular type of ore, creating a one-of-a-kind monument that its creators never knew would last millennia. Its endurance is a silent monument not just to a king, but to a lost industrial process, a beautiful accident of ancient chemistry that we are only now able to fully understand. From the molecular mastery of Woot's steel to the delicate patience of granulation, we have journeyed through a landscape of forgotten genius. These were not mere trades practiced in smoky workshops, but the highest expressions of science and art, disciplines that built empires and defined entire cultures. They manipulated chemistry to create rust-proof iron and self-healing alloys. They commanded physics to project hidden images from bronze mirrors and to weave metal as soft as cloth. Each technique, from the brutal ballet of pattern welding to the alchemical baths of Shakudo, represents a pinnacle of human ingenuity, a solution to a problem we can barely comprehend today. These lost arts force us to see the past not as a primitive prelude, but as a gallery of masterpieces whose blueprints have been tragically misplaced. So the great mystery remains: what other secrets are still buried, hidden in plain sight within artifacts we have yet to fully understand or in soils we have not yet turned? Which of these 30 forgotten techniques captured your imagination the most? Was it the watery patterns of Damascus steel, the ghostly light of the magic mirrors, or the patient sacrifice of the lost wax process? Let us know in the comments and subscribe to continue unearthing the deepest mysteries of our shared history.